today's program, the coordinator of special projects at the Ministry of Agriculture, Compton, highlights the ongoing agriculture incentive programs of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Production, Fisheries and Rural Development. I am Amanda-Faye Clarke and this is Agriculture in Focus. Good day and welcome. The coordinator of special projects at the Ministry of Agriculture, Compton, highlights the ongoing agriculture incentive programs of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Production, Fisheries and Rural Development. The current agriculture development incentive regime is aimed at assisting the farming community, be it livestock and crop producers, agro-processors and fishers, in offsetting some of the costs incurred from producing their goods. In this interview with Mr. Compton, we'll learn the relevance and importance of incentive programs to our agriculture economy. This afternoon you're here to speak about the agriculture incentive programs. Can you tell me what these are?
Basically, agriculture incentives are initiatives that are created or conceptualized and they are introduced to stimulate economic activity in the agricultural sector. And this can be at the farm level, they can be at the production processing level, and they can also be at the marketing level. Two good examples. At this point, the ministry is encouraging farmers to go into greenhouse production because most of our farmers depend on open field production. And if there's too much rain, for example, it affects production. Too little rain, it can affect production. So there's a very thin rope that our farmers have to work on. When they produce, they overproduce. And when there is a shortage, the country has to import. And that, of course, increases our food import bill. So there are incentives in place at the moment so that farmers can go into greenhouse production. Farmers can import their greenhouses and they get an incentive by way of concessions in the form of waivers and taxes. And of course, the greenhouses then can be much cheaper for them. So that's the kind of assistance that we give to farmers. And this in itself is encouragement so that the farmers can adopt more improved technologies. Another good example is there's a public-private partnership between the Ministry of Agriculture and CFL. The farmers go through a training period to become certified farmers. When they become certified farmers, of course, they graduate and they have to maintain that certification. Now, these certified farmers, they sell their produce to Consolidated Food Limited and they fetch a premium price. So this in itself is an incentive for the adoption of good agricultural practices. So one can safely say that agricultural incentives are privilege given to stakeholders in the agricultural sector in view of special circumstances.
You mentioned the public-private partnerships and mentioned CFL as one of those partners. And we know you work closely with ICA and some other special organizations in terms of pushing forward the agriculture programs or agricultural programs within the ministry. What are some of the special circumstances that warrants the provision of incentives from government to stakeholders in the agriculture sector in Lucia?
All I can say, a lot depends on the situation at any point in time. If we go way back and look at the banana industry, there's no contradiction of the fact that banana production contributed significantly to the economy of St. Lucia. And when banana production did increase, the ministry recognized somewhere back in 1985 that there was a problem. Farmers were faced with challenges. They did not have transportation. So it was then the ministry introduced the first agricultural incentive program. So the incentives were granted by way of concessions in the form of a waiver of duties and taxes to make single cab vans or vehicles, cheaper for farmers. And that in itself contributed to the growth and development of the banana industry. By 1993, we can safely say that St. Lucia was the largest producer of bananas, somewhere in the region of 134 metric tons of bananas. But after 1993, then banana production started to go down. Why? Because there are preferential agreements and arrangements between the European Union and the Windward Islands, of course, started eroding. Then there was other factors such as labor costs, increasing labor costs, increasing the cost of inputs, increase generally in the cost of production. And of course, because of that, over time, banana production has declined. And by 2005, it got to 39,000 metric tons. It was then the ministry recognized that there was need to urgently diversify the agricultural sector. And the ministry introduced the Agricultural Development Incentive Regime by way of Cabinet Conclusion 287 in April 2005. And it was a list of items that farmers could purchase and get concessions for in the form of a waiver of duties and taxes. And not too long after that, in November 2005, there was Cabinet Conclusion 851, where the ministry introduced a whole matrix of items. And one criterion was for farmers to be members of an organization. And if you were a member of organization then, you'd have gotten a higher level of concessions. But of course, that criterion was thrown out of the window because our constitution clearly indicates that there has to be freedom of association. And you can't discriminate against a farmer if he's going to be an independent farmer.
And that takes on a different tone, but I want to come back to the Agriculture Development Incentive Program. Under this current regime, I know you revisited that and saying there should be freedom of association, but what are the general criteria that a farmer must meet for him or her to be awarded this concession?
Okay, like I said, currently, if a farmer has to apply for concessions, being a member of organization that was thrown out of the window, as I said, there has to be evidence of business viability. The farmer has to attach to an application form, and I should mention first that the application form can be obtained on the ministry's website. Because anybody who can get online, and the web address is www.malff.com. And once, of course, the first page that will show up is the introductory page, and there's the minister's photo. Just under the minister's photo, there are about 5 links, one of them for concession application forms. And once this concession application form is filled, then, as I said, there has to be evidence of business viability. So all the receipts, the sale receipts of the previous year and that of the current year has to be attached to the application form. Next to this, there has to be access to financial resources. If the farmer or the fisher, I should also mention the fisher, if the farmer or the fisher has funds and can finance the effort, they'll indicate on the concession form. If they can't and they're being assisted by a lending institution or financial institution, they have to attach a financial institution declaration, which is basically a letter from the financial institution indicating that an amount will be loaned to the farmer or the fisher to go into production of some sort. Next, there has to be evidence access to land. All right, if the producer owns his or her own land, all they have to do is to attach a copy of the land register or a copy of the deed of sale to the application. If the land is going to be rented or leased, the owner of the land has to provide them with a copy of the land register or the deed of sale so that they can attach, and also a letter from the owner indicating that they're going to be leasing or renting the property to the producer, and that letter has to be signed by a JP. So that's basically all in a nutshell. Once this is done, it can be submitted in the case of fishers to the fisheries extension officer, in the case of crop farmers to the crop extension officer, and then goes to the ministry. In the case of a livestock producer, can be given to one of the livestock officers or to the Veterinary Livestock Services Division at the office at Beausejour or at Union, and of course it will be channeled up the line for processing. And I also want to mention that if the value of the concession or the value of the waiver is equivalent to $100,000 or less, the application can be processed at the Ministry of Agriculture. If it's more than $100,000, then the final approval will come from Cabinet. So of course it will take 1 to 4 weeks to process an application.
So much information here, Mr. Compton. I want to thank you for joining us on this first half of the program because we're due for a break, and we have been speaking on the Agricultural Development Incentive Regime, currently part of the Ministry of Agriculture's several initiatives at this time. When we return, we'll speak a little more on the new Agriculture and Fisheries Incentive Bills and the relevance of incentives program within the agriculture sector in St. Lucia.
Did you know that government provides duty-free incentives on farm machinery, inputs, irrigation systems, boat engines, boats, and many more? Investing in agriculture, a wise choice.
Welcome back to the program, Mr. Compton, and to our listeners. Before the break, we started speaking on how a farmer or fisher can apply for concessions and what criteria should be met for one to apply for the incentives. You mentioned a few of the incentives that the Ministry of Agriculture have had thus far. Can you just give us an idea by just naming what are some of the other concessions that we've had so far?
Basically, the current Agricultural Development Incentive regime is made up of a whole matrix. Divided it basically in 3 sections. You have primary goods, and the primary goods are like vehicles, water pumps, generators, fishing boats, fishing nets, engines. You have also primary services. If a farmer has to do a bit of on-farm road rehabilitation, or if a farmer has to deal with some pest or disease for pest and disease management and control, that sort of thing, they can get concessions. And there are also technological innovations, such as if a farmer has to build a biodigester to deal with livestock waste, if a farmer has to build a solar dryer to dry cocoa, for example, that's a sort of technological innovation. So all of these they can get concessions for. Now, what I want to say is that the whole idea of the agriculture incentive regime was to bring farmers together to form cohesive groups as organizations such as cooperatives and associations. But really, this never really happened because our farmers like to work as independent farmers. So this really never happened. So that criterion was basically thrown out of the window and not used again because, like I said, our constitution allows for freedom of association. So if a farmer doesn't want to be a member of an organization, he or she should be free. And there should not be discrimination and preferential treatment for farmers who are members of organizations. So the ministry decided to do away with this criterion. But there are other criteria that the farmers have to meet to, like I mentioned earlier, access to land, access to financial resources.
Could you tell me, Mr. Compton, why are agricultural incentives even more necessary now to encourage the growth and development of our agriculture sector?
Again, we can go back and look at the whole banana industry. When St. Lucia produced somewhere in the region of 134,000 metric tons of bananas, this quantity or quantum was produced by 10,000 farmers, approximately. Each farmer at the time employed on average 3 persons. The larger estates, of course, employed more persons. All right? So about 30,000 persons, plus the 10,000 farmers, that's 40,000, and plus all the workers on the periphery, the boxing plant workers, etc., brought it to about 50,000 persons. About 50,000 persons, almost 1/3 of our population, depending or benefiting directly from the banana industry. So now that there has been a decline in production to, say, to only 12,000 metric tons, where have all those persons gone? So incentives are very important to stimulate or to create jobs in rural areas, because most of the jobs in rural areas are held by people who live there in rural areas. And if we don't do that, then you'll get migration to urban areas. And a lot of that has happened and probably theoretically contributing to crime. So it's a responsibility as far as rural development is concerned. It's a responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture to see how best they can create jobs in rural areas.
Do you think the incentive programs are applicable to emerging industries such as aquaculture and industries that we're trying to revamp in a way like apiculture and so on?
Absolutely. Across the board, both for crop, livestock, and fisheries. Across the board, yes.
As we're winding down, Mr. Compton, I just wanted you to give me a little overview of the new Agriculture and Fisheries Incentive Bill.
Yes. Like I said earlier, the Ministry of Tourism has its Tourism Incentive Act. The Ministry of Commerce has its Fiscal Incentive Act. The Ministry of Agriculture has no such legislation. All we have is the Agricultural Development Incentive Regime. So the Prime Minister and our Minister of Agriculture has asked us to go ahead and develop the Agriculture and Fisheries Incentive Bill, which we successfully did. And it's currently with the Attorney General's office being reviewed. Once it's reviewed and approved, there's a lot that the producers and the fishers can look forward to. Basically, we are asking for a complete waiver of all duties and taxes on items for the production or processing of primary agricultural produce. And this will entail a waiver of the excise tax, the import duty, and the service charge. So a significant amount will be removed from the cost of items that farmers have to import or purchase for production purposes or for even fishers.
Yeah, and we can go on this discussion. I do hope you can join Agriculture in Focus at a later date to talk more on the agriculture incentive programs. Thank you once again, Mr. Compton, for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for joining us on Agriculture in Focus. Agriculture in Focus is brought to you by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Production, Fisheries and Rural Development, and up until next time, I'm Amanda-Faye Clarke, thanking you so much for joining us.